Hey, it's Craig Syracusa, and welcome to another episode of Walk in Faith, the show where we go beyond the image and we discover who our guests really are. You might know them from TV, the big screen, or even the world of sports, but do we really know who they are as a person? Do we know what motivates them? Do we know what inspires them? Well, that's what we're here to find out.
As we kick off the Christmas season, we're live at the Sheen Center. We're about to watch an amazing film called The Star. It's the first time the birth of Jesus Christ is being done in animation, where the story is told by a donkey. So, thank you so much. This is a huge, exciting night for you.
Yes, thanks.
Wonderful to meet you. So now, a couple of questions before we do the interview. How did you get involved in this film? Like, how did this come about?
Well, Sony knew, this was not my idea. Sony wanted to make this movie. They were looking for a director, and when they talked to me about it, I got really excited because to me, there was an opportunity to be part of something really classic. For me as a kid growing up, we had a lot of movies that we took out of the attic during Christmas time, but none of them were actually about the birth of Jesus. We had a lot of movies about Santa Claus, a lot of movies, The Christmas Carol, but there wasn't anything that us kids that we really wanted to watch that was based on the Nativity story. So to me, the idea of telling it from the point of view of the animals was an opportunity to present it in a fresh way that would interest children and the whole family. So. Anyway, that was what was really exciting to me, and that's why I wanted to be involved.
Now tonight we happen to have a man of faith who was behind this, and this is a story of faith. So this is kind of explicitly religious, but we have a lot of things that may not be explicitly religious, but are hinting at it. And that sometimes is the bait that gets people to take the divine more seriously. You get them through the interest, you get them through the humor, you get them through the cartoon figures, and then bingo, you got the great message.
Now, what was it like to work with this A-list celebrities? I mean, to work with this cast. I mean, it's.
What was so great about Oprah, about all of our cast, was they were so game. They were, they wanted to be part of this movie, and they were just so generous with themselves, which is great.
Stay tuned for another episode of Walk in Faith. Thanks again for sitting down with me. I know we had a few minutes. Mm-hmm. So I must say, you're one of the most fascinating people I've met. I looked you up online and did a lot of research. And Head Over Heels is what a cool film. The films that you've done are amazing.
Well, I'm still at the beginning of my career, so yeah, I'm hoping that this is just the beginning. Hopefully, many, many more to come.
Yeah, I hope so too. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I was watching one of your lectures, it was communicating values through movies, mm-hmm. and fascinating. But one of the stories that really stuck out was about your father's friend, mm-hmm. and about his religious conversion story. Did that story have an effect on your father, or did it have an effect on your own sort of spiritual journey? Well,
yeah, that was a story about a family friend who was, like an Ivy League educated atheist, and he had heard every argument that you could give as to the existence of God, but then went swimming in the beach and got sort of overtaken by some waves and basically fell unconscious and blacked out in the middle of the ocean and absolutely should have drowned. But he woke up on the shore alive. Wow. And sure, there are many ways that could have happened naturally. It doesn't necessarily have to be a miracle, but for him himself, a guy who's heard every argument, that was to him the most compelling evidence of the presence of a loving God, and that's what brought him back to his religious faith. So, I guess to me, the thing that really strikes me about that story is that there are limits to what you can argue someone into believing. Ultimately, life is really our biggest teacher, I think, in terms of what we're going to believe about the world. And I think that movies play a role in that because movies can provide people with sort of a vicarious life experience. It's the only way that everyone can kind of share in the same experience because they're watching the same movie. You yourself might have this really personal experience out there on the beach surviving these waves, but that's not an experience that you can export to anyone. But I think that the power of the media is that you can invite people in to share the same experience.
I agree. And now, does your personal faith, does it compel you to make films that are sort of faith-based, or do you keep the two worlds separate?
No, I mean, I would say I don't feel that I need to do faith-based movies, but I also don't feel that I need to keep them separate. To me, you know, I guess as Christians, we're followers of Christ, and I don't see Jesus the carpenter as a guy who made faith-based chairs and tables. I think he's a guy that made really good chairs and tables that worked the way they were supposed to. And so for me as a filmmaker, that's where I see my role in terms of imitating Christ, is that I should just make good movies that are entertaining, that are engaging, that are suspenseful, and that ultimately are moving. And if these movies cover what's good, true, and beautiful in the world, then they're going to give whatever a faith-based movie could give to you, but they're also going to be able to give that to people outside of the faith audience.
And sometimes in Hollywood, you know, just expressing your faith or identifying with a faith could affect your career or the longevity of it. Why is that? Why?
Well, you know, it's funny. I certainly came into Hollywood thinking that that my faith would be like a sort of a stumbling block, or it would cause problems for me in my career. But the truth is, like, not only this job, of course, here I am directing my first feature film. It's about the birth of Jesus, and the fact that I'm a man of faith definitely played a part in the fact that the studio wanted to hire me. So in that sense, actually has helped. And I also had an experience on a film where I was asked as an animator to animate a shot that had some sexual content that I wasn't comfortable animating. And I got so nervous about asking. I was thinking, I'm going to need to ask not to do this, but I really don't want to get fired. And I was so stressed out. And I approached the director, finally thinking to myself, well, if he fires me, I guess I'll be fired for the right reasons. And so I said, look, man, I just don't feel comfortable with the shot. Can you put me on something else? And he said, yeah, you're like the third person to ask for that. We'll find something else for you, no problem. And I was like, oh. So it's no big deal. You know, honestly, like, I guess from the outside, the film industry looks like this sort of, you know, Sodom and Gomorrah kind of place. But honestly, there's so many people in the industry. The industry is as diverse as the rest of the country. It's maybe just the high-profile people that we hear about that can scare people of faith off. But I really hope that we can get over that. I really hope that parents whose kids are interested in movies don't scare them away from the industry, because we need those people. We need those people coming into the industry in order to change it.
I love that answer. I mean, that's honestly you're the first person to actually given that honest answer. Now, just want to talk to you about some moments. Can films create moments that have lasting effects on society? And what type of moments can help reshape or alter society in a positive and a negative way? And what moments have you either experienced or witnessed that have sort of changed your life?
Oh, there's a lot of questions.
It's a long question.
I
told you.
Yeah, I do think movies have a special power to actually change the world, because when you come out of a movie theater, you're coming out seeing the world in a new way, and that can be in a better way or in a negative way. You can come out of a movie theater sort of feeling angry and sort of, I guess. You can come out of a movie theater feeling very open to life and open to the people around you, or you can come out of a movie feeling selfish and closed. And I think filmmakers have a responsibility to use their movie, to see that their movies are having it. It's a rock dropping in a pond, right? There's a ripple effect, and these movies do ripple out into society. And movies that present people in one-dimensional ways, and that, you know, rely on stereotypes and sort of just work up all of our human tendency to see the other as something that we should be afraid of. That's really irresponsible for filmmakers. And I think, yeah, the best movies, the movies that really stick with us, are movies that ring true to something deep within us. There's Blaise Pascal, one of my favorite philosophers. He has a quote where he says that when let's say a movie, he didn't say a movie, but when a book or a movie or a play or whatever, when it speaks to something true and really resonates in a person, then the person seeing that movie feels grateful to the movie, not because the movie's given us treasures, but because it's revealed to us the treasures that are already inside of us. It's revealed that we already have treasures. And that's the kind of thing that I think movies really have a special power to do. I mean, I think of the first time this really sank in for me was when I went and saw Monsters Incorporated in the movie theater, because I came out of that movie. That movie ends with a really beautiful act of friendship where Mike Wazowski, the little one-eyed green monster, has spent years saving up all these little pieces of the shredded door so that he can finally let his friend Sully go back and visit this little girl that they spent so much time with. And he's got Band-Aids on his fingers, and it's a beautiful moment that shows that friendship involves sacrifice, and that that you can really make a change for somebody. And I guess I came out of that theater, I'm still feeling, I'm getting goosebumps remembering that moment. I just felt so willing to serve, I guess, and I wanted to do that for the people around me. And yeah, I think, boy, if a movie can inspire you to do that, that's a really strong tool we have.
Sorry it took so long, pal. There was a lot of wood to go through.
Do you think some of the moments in films, and you used in your lecture Star Wars, so some of the moments in films, does filmmaker actually place those moments, or as a viewer we interpret moments in a different way?
Well, yeah, I mean, the filmmaker's doing, as a filmmaker, what I'm trying to do is be the first audience member of the movie. So that I feel like that's the director's role, really, is to sit back and watch what your collaborators have put together and say, okay, this is supposed to be funny, but I'm not laughing. So something's not quite right in the way that we've cut this, or something like that. Or this is supposed to be scary, but I'm not feeling scared, so something's not right. So the filmmaker, I think, does his best to anticipate what the audience is going to feel, but ultimately, the real audience members bring their own baggage to the movie, and if something that you see in a movie resonates to you personally in a special way, that's oftentimes something the director had no intention of doing. But I guess that's the power of stories as opposed to arguments, because stories can be interpreted so many different ways. There's so many ways into them. It's not as didactic as an argument, which is this kind of single path. And I think that's why, people like watching movies more than they like going to lectures.
And do you think Hollywood in general does a good job at putting out faith-based films?
I think Hollywood's getting better at doing faith-based films. I think that for a long time, and I guess really prior to The Passion of the Christ, faith-based films were being made, but they were being made, I mean, I hesitate to use this word, but really it was in a ghetto. Like, they were films only for Christians. Everyone else would look down on them, and they were, sort of low budget, not very high quality. And I think after The Passion of the Christ, it showed Hollywood, not to be a cynic, but it showed Hollywood, hey, there's money to be made with this audience. By giving this audience high quality material and getting that audience to embrace it, well, that's a good business. Hollywood is a business, it's show business. And and so lately, I mean, I think especially with Devon Franklin, who's an exec on the movie, Devon has been doing really great work with Heaven is for Real and Miracles from Heaven and his whole slate of movies, because he insists on a high level of quality, filmmaking quality, as well as real authenticity in the way that the faith is treated. And it seems like Hollywood has been trying to find that balance, because sometimes it's a very authentic film, but it's preachy and not high quality. Or on the other hand, there's a really great, expensive-looking film, but you feel that the filmmaker isn't really treating the source material with the respect that it deserves. I mean, I think we've seen that with a lot of Hollywood movies that came out and failed because the core audience didn't embrace them.
So now, one of the things, Hollywood, though, they do such a great job at sort of glorifying society in a negative way. Why do they do that? Like, why are most of these films created around this image?
Well, I guess it's probably rooted in human nature, and they say sex sells. Sex sells, violence sells, everything that makes a movie rated R sells, right? Like, I think it just gets to like the fallen nature of humanity, and there's something in us that when you drive past a car accident, your better nature should be saying Hail Mary or something, but then part of you is going like, whoa, I wonder if I'm seeing blood. If there's sort of a lurid, leering side of human nature that I think it's easy to appeal to that side of us. It's easy to make a quick buck off of that, but those aren't the movies that people remember and that people take off the shelf time and time again, year after year. The movies that people do that with are the movies that connect to something true.
Yeah.
I think about movies like E.T., It's a Wonderful Life, which is, I mean, it's probably 60 years old or something like that, but people are still watching it because it still has a lot of power because it's true.
And do you think at a certain point the audience or Hollywood in general will understand that we should go back to making sort of wholesome films and wholesome TV shows?
Well, I have a feeling that it's going to be like the way it is for a while, because it will always be easier to sell something that appeals to our less good nature, right? And it's just the path of least resistance. It's very hard to make a movie that upholds virtue that also doesn't feel preachy. And a lot of times too, like the best way to show virtue is to show vice, is to show a character who needs to grow, because we're all in the same situation. We're all sinners, And the story of a Christian is not a story of someone who never makes a mistake. It's a story of someone who keeps falling but keeps getting up. And so maybe another thing that the faith-based audience should consider is that that we should also be open to movies about redemption, sin and redemption. And maybe these movies that we tend to see as being so negative, there might actually be something really useful that we can learn from them if there's some kind of redemptive message to them as well.
No, I agree. Not talking about myself. I did a film similar to what you're saying where I focused not on the core audience of Catholics or Christians. I wanted to show, I did a mafia movie about redemption. And then the idea was to attract an audience that would never watch a faith-based film. And I said it would either fail or succeed. And it didn't succeed, it failed. But I sold it and, whatever. But that was something that caught me. So I want to ask you a question about short content. So I think that short content will be the death or will affect long-form content. I think, for instance, my son. Like, I've only introduced short content. His attention span, even throughout the youth, they don't really have the same attention spans that we had in the past. Do you think that short content will be the death or will affect long-form content?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the really interesting thing about short content, especially with Netflix and all this streaming stuff, the streaming methods of accessing them, is that, sure, it's a 20-minute episode, but when you watch 8 of them, you're watching something that's ultimately longer than a movie is. And so, it's sort of like you can buy one of those big blocks of Hershey's, and technically, it's broken down into those little things, but if you eat enough of those little things, you ate the whole big bar. And so I guess, I don't know if attention spans are getting shorter or if it's just that people have a fear of commitment, and 2 hours is a scary commitment. But if you could commit 2 hours, 40 minutes at a time, and then that's something people can do. I think that movies in the movie theater are never going to get shorter because it takes time to drive the car or take the subway to the movie theater. There's a certain amount of time you invest just to get to the movie theater, and you want to feel like you're getting your money's worth when you sit down, and so, when a movie is less than an hour, that's not something that's worth going to the movie theater for. It. By the same token, there is like a time limit in the amount of time you can sit on your butt, and so movies will never really get longer than 3 hours because you just can't handle it. So, movies have been around for longer than television. Movies have been around since the 19th century, and we've, I think, landed on the right length. It's somewhere between 75 and 120 minutes. That's the length of time that people are willing to sit down and watch a movie. And I feel like people were talking about shortened attention spans back in the days of MTV. They're talking about it now in the days of Netflix, but ultimately it's still somewhere between 75 and 120. That's what people want to watch.
Okay. That's a good answer, fair answer. I think we'll see what happens in the future. Yeah. I know for myself, I can't even sit through an hour and a half without, using some sort of device. Like, I have such issues with that. What do you think the next the next platform that the generations will use to sort of, just watch content? What do you think it's going to be?
Well, yeah, people are talking about, like, the fact that kids are watching stuff on iPads and cell phones, and maybe this is just the cinephile, like, film purist in me, but I don't see that as equivalent. Like, it's small. It's not the same as sitting in the... To me, the biggest difference is that when you're sitting in a theater, the film is the master on you. If you leave this, then we're not stopping the show for you. But when you're sitting at home, even if you don't hit the pause button, the fact that you can hit the pause button, I think it lets the audience member... You don't have to submit to the film. You don't have to just say, okay, I'm sitting, I'm going to give you some time, show me what you got. At home, it's like, okay, impress me. And, if I'm not impressed in 4 minutes, I'm going to something else, Exactly. And that does affect the type of content, that affects the type of movies that people put out. So I guess I just hope that people keep going to the movie theaters, because there's a certain kind of movie experience that can only really happen in the movies, when you're in the dark, surrounded by other people, and the movie's just going to keep going until it's over.
Just now, I just want to talk about head over heels. One thing that I thought about was, my take on it was about relationships, right? And over time, we begin to sort of separate or grow apart from our spouses, right? And it happens over time, and unless we sort of adjust to the changes that have taken place. Was that the intent of the film, and what was the film based on? Was it based on a person or a relationship that you know of?
You're right. That's what it's. The thing I wanted to do with that movie was to show a side of romantic love that I don't think gets treated by Hollywood enough. I think that we were presented with this idea that romantic love is falling in love. And falling in love is great, it's a wonderful thing, but it's like 0.5% of what a long-term romantic relationship is about. Once you've fallen in love, you're done with that. Now you've got the hard work of maintaining the relationship. And just like a car, it breaks down if you don't maintain it. And when it breaks down, it's not time to throw it out, it's time to fix it. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with Head Over Heels, was present romantic love as something that you got to work on, and something that requires constant effort and sacrifice. And the funny thing was, I made that movie before I was married. But it still, in some ways, was based on the relationship I had at the time. She's now my wife, but she was my girlfriend then. We were long distance. I was in England, she was in New York and Boston, and that was not easy. I mean, we just found ourselves getting into arguments, and frequently asking ourselves, like, is this worth it? Should we just like break this off? And because this is so hard. It's so easy to have a misunderstanding in an email or in a text message. And hey, I mean, proof's in the pudding. We stuck it out, and now we're very, very happily married, and having a blast actually being married. So I don't know, I guess, yeah, that was really kind of where I took the inspiration. Also, I mean, the other thing of it is that my wife's politics are not my politics. She's on the left, I'm more on the right. She's not religious, I'm Catholic. I mean, also, her family's very quiet and polite. My family's really loud and sort of Latin.
Sounds like my family.
Yeah, so that movie is also the whole metaphor of the upside down relationship is about the fact that when you fall in love with somebody, you're never falling in love with like the person you would have created for yourself. If you could enter all the details in a computer program and hit enter and there's your perfect woman, it's never like that. It's always like, there's always things about the person you've fallen in love with that are opportunities for you to grow, because you have to learn how to deal with those things.
Now, what happened in the characters? What created that division between Walter and Madge?
Yeah, you know, I never thought of it. I never thought about it at the time, but since then, and having conversations with people, what I kind of think might have happened is that they had kids, and the kids were really rambunctious, running all over the walls. Some of them was just playing on the ceiling, and eventually, Walter and Madge were like, "Look, you take the floor. I'm going to take the ceiling. That way, we'll have these kids taken care of, right?" And it kind of worked that way for a while. But then the kids went off to college, and they had forgotten how to be on the same level. I don't know.
That was an afterthought, definitely.
It was an afterthought, but
I'm like, where were the kids staying? It looked like a one-bedroom apartment now.
Could be, yeah, it's
like a small
prequel.
house, but yeah. It was great. Just a few more questions. I know you got to run, but now, what moment stands out of that film? Like, out of all the moments you've created during that project?
For the star.
Yeah.
You mean in the movie itself?
Yeah.
I think the really key moment in the movie is when Bo the donkey, he's our main character. He's been on this quest to do something great, which he thinks is joining this big grand royal caravan. It's like playing for a great basketball team or something. If you're a donkey, that's the best thing you could ever do. But when he finally gets there, he feels like, this is not really going to satisfy this need that I have inside of me to do something great. And you know what? The people I'm leaving behind, Mary and Joseph, those people that are important to me, even if they're not important to the world, of course he doesn't know yet the truth, but he realizes, you know what, that's really the important thing that I feel called to do. So I think that's a moment that I hope will resonate with a lot of the audience, and because I think a lot of us would love to be part of something bigger than ourselves, and for a lot of us in our dreams that involves fame and fortune and being a huge important person that everyone talks about. But for most of us, that's not really in the cards for us. It's more just what God's calling you to do, the great thing God's calling you to do is to be a great dad or be a great mom or be a great son, a great student. If you're a kid, it's just to be a great 4th grade student and be a good teammate to your soccer player teammates. And that's where God has placed you, so that's the great thing he's calling you to do. And yeah, so to me, that's really the message of the film. It's also connected to the message of Christmas. God chose to do something great, to come to this planet as our Savior under the form of a very humble appearance, as a baby born to a peasant couple in a stable.
I mean, what a great idea. I know, you directed and all, but why wasn't this done before? Like, you would think, like, this story, an animation about the birth of Jesus Christ should have been done, like, I completely agree. Yeah,
right?
It's like, how come I didn't think of that?
That was, you know, when I first started talking to the studio about making this movie, you know, they were looking for a director and presented this idea, and I had the same thought. I was like, in retrospect, this movie is so obvious. It's like these animal characters are already in everyone's nativity set. You don't even have to invent any of them. They're already there. But all we have to do is just point the camera this way and ask this guy, what did you think was going on?
It's a brilliant idea. And just one other question. I asked Cardinal Dolan this. When you were a kid, right? Were you allowed to put out the nativity? Like that was something that was like, you know, the most important thing in the household.
Yeah, we did. We put it out. We set up the nativity set, and truth is, for us kids, we were far more interested in the hanging of Christmas tree ornaments. But I will say that my interest in stop motion animation and model making probably started with those nativity sets, because in my home parish as a kid, that very elaborately built, very realistic, detailed models of all the characters, and man, I was fascinated by that as a kid, and it brought it to life in a really special way. And Cardinal Dolan was just telling me that St. Francis of Assisi was really the guy that invented the creche and the tradition of dramatizing this with little models, and I think that it's a way of capturing the imagination. It's a way of bringing this story, because without that, the story's in a book, or it's being spoken to you from a pulpit. But when you can actually see that and look at a face and wonder, what's this character thinking? That brings it to life in a completely different way, and ultimately that's what this movie does too.
And what do you think the ultimate plan is for your life?
I think I'm hoping that God is calling me to keep being a filmmaker, to keep making movies. I love it, and I think that's always a good sign of a vocation. If there's something that you love, that love's been put there. I hope that that's the way that God's called me to change the world and to have a good effect on the world, is through these movies that I make.
I agree with you. I think you are going to change the world, especially with this film.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Always remember, we have the ability to inspire and evangelize through our words and actions. Till next time, thanks for walking with us. Do you have any favorite traditions when you were a kid that you could tell us about during the Christmas season?
Yeah, we were always we did weekend CCD, and our CCD group would do a Christmas play every year. And the thing I remember was that I just remember one time at the end of the play, my grandfather and my grandmother had both been crying, and my grandmother was crying because she was seeing her little grandkids in the play. My grandfather's crying because it was so bad, At one point, the innkeeper opens the door, and he can't see Joseph because Joseph's 4'2", with the kid playing Joseph.
What part did you play?
I played a king most years. Played a shepherd once. It always had sharpied mustaches. That was the best thing about it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. See you in a few.
Okay, see you.